10's Late News with Darren Roberts.
Tonight, the Peter Reith telecard affair going from bad to worse for the government. Growing pressure on the government over soaring petrol prices, and claims a bottle of wine does more good than most anti-wrinkle creams. Prime Minister John Howard is sticking by his minister Peter Reith despite things going from bad to worse. Leaked documents now show the government was warned about the fraud on his phone card at least a year before investigations began.
Peter Reith was the focus of anti-corporate protesters outside a Liberal fundraising lunch in Sydney. Earlier, the Prime Minister had vigorously defended his minister.
And I don't believe the grounds exist for Mr Reith to leave the government, and I'm sticking by him.
That's despite documents leaked to the Sydney Morning Herald showing the government was aware 13 months earlier of the illegal use of Mr Reith's telecard, but did nothing.
And the decision was made by somebody in the department after investigating the matter that there was no basis of taking it any further, that there was a proper explanation.
The government had previously told Parliament it had not been given an earlier warning about the telecard misuse.
Mr Fay's statement in the Parliament was wrong. Mr Fay has misled the Parliament.
There's also now a contradiction over events at the minister's son's house in 1994, where flatmate Ingrid Odgers came into possession of the phone card PIN number.
Mr Reith was not present in that house.
My son and I were both staying in the same place.
Today, Mr Reith was in Karratha, effectively avoiding the scandal, which has seen him rated by the number of talkback radio calls as Australia's most unwanted, well ahead of Kevin Gosper and Mal Colston.
Does this mean that any politician now that's given a card can just hand it to anyone?
No, it does not mean that.
The Australian Democrats have now joined the opposition in calling for an independent inquiry into the whole affair. Paul Smith, 10 News.
An investigation by Australia's consumer watchdog suggests government promises the GST wouldn't affect fuel prices were lies. The ACCC says the tax is at least partially to blame.
Professor Alan Fells has been watching the price of petrol rise since the 30th of June.
No motorist is going to be pleased about what's happened because of the vast rise in prices.
The ACCC has compiled a detailed report showing the dramatic jump in the cost of fuel. The biggest increase has been in the price of diesel. In 3 months, it rose by an average of 16.9 cents a litre in capital cities and 16.1 cents a litre in country areas. The average cost of a litre of unleaded fuel has also risen by 8.3 cents a litre in the nation's cities and a fraction more in the country. The price of LPG has also gone up, but it's become more expensive in the city than the country. Professor Fells says the GST is only one of the factors that has influenced the price rise.
The new tax system has contributed to the extent that there's been a GST applied at 10% to the price of petrol.
2 years ago, Prime Minister Howard made a promise to Australia.
The GST will not increase the price of petrol for the ordinary motorist.
Today, he was backpedalling.
Our position has always been that the reason petrol's a very high, painfully high price now is the world price of oil, and I don't think anything in this report is likely to shake that.
Mr Howard's promise that there'd be no GST impact on the price of petrol has been broken, and the whistle has been blown on that.
A leading motoring group says high taxes are to blame.
We recognise there are higher crude oil prices, we recognise the dollar is low. Motorists are not fools, they know that, but they also know they've been dudded because the taxation is higher than it should be.
Mignon Henne, 10 News.
Aboriginal leader Charles Perkins, who died on Wednesday, is to be given a state funeral. The federal government says the honour is in recognition of his central role in Indigenous affairs over 4 decades. It'll be held at the Sydney Town Hall next Wednesday, with the public invited to join a procession to Bennelong Point. Dr Perkins will be buried in Alice Springs. Victoria's Ombudsman has demanded to know why charges against police involved in a vicious baton charge last December have been dropped. Protesters say they'll continue living the nightmare until the officers involved are held accountable.
It's almost 7 years since protesters fighting against the closure of Richmond Secondary College were baton charged by police. The Ombudsman found the action could have caused injury or death, and internal police disciplinary charges were laid against 8 members. Force Command has now dropped the charges, saying too much time has elapsed. Protester Elvie Sievers is devastated.
Now the news that they're not going to face the charges is like somebody's come along and ripped what was a healing scar wide open again.
Police Command says the officers have lived with the charges hanging over them for years because of legal delays, adding justice delayed is justice denied. But lawyers for 30 protesters taking civil action against the force insist there is no justice.
That delay hasn't been justified and therefore shouldn't be relied upon to drop the charges now.
Ombudsman Dr Barry Perry has demanded to know why he wasn't consulted about Command's decision.
I understand this is an internal disciplinary matter for the police. The Ombudsman is charged with the responsibility of examining and checking that.
Protesters say ugly scenes outside the recent World Economic Forum prove the force hasn't learned from its mistakes.
There just seems to be that there's not ever going to be a time when we can say, all right, it shouldn't have happened, it was a disgrace, but it's been dealt with and now we can move on.
Martine Griffiths, 10 News.
Australian Paralympian Hamish McDonald has decided not to challenge his last-minute exclusion from the shot put, the event for which he won gold 4 years ago. Hamish was deemed too mobile to compete in the classification he'd entered and ruled ineligible just moments before competition began.
In making this decision, one of my main considerations was the impact this dispute has had and may continue to have on the athletics team and on the full Australian team. Sadly, this dispute has taken some media and public attention away from the terrific athletic endeavours of Team 2000 members.
Some better news though for our cyclists. The mixed sprint team today continuing the gold rush at the velodrome. Matthew Gray, Paul Lake and Greg Ball making easy work of France. And on the latest medal standings, Australia has slipped to 4th position on the table. Despite our 3 gold, 4 silver and 5 bronze medals, we're still behind Great Britain, France and Spain, but matched by the United States to complete the top 5 placings. And ahead in the late news, the cosmetic queen who's branded anti-aging creams a waste of money. Rival biker gangs rev up for the weekend festivities. And later, the sizzling swimsuit set to send temperatures soaring this summer.